When I want to know about esports, I go to his channel. This is Steel and you're watching Thorin.
Now, in the NBA, when you say there's a mouse in the house, what that means is you've got an undersized defender on you, so throw me the ball so that you can basically go to work and wreck this guy on the block, the post-up game, as it were. Well, this mouse has taken over the house, hasn't it? Because obviously they've just won the last CSGO LAN, or at least the last meaningful one. Now, mouse... not MOUZ Spots, they technically did that rebrand thing where you get rid of the old name, which I hate, but okay. MOUZ has won ESL ProLeague Season 18, the last ever CSGO LAN, or the last meaningful CSGO LAN. We're now on to CS2 and roll on IEM Sydney in, what, like a week and a half or something. They came into the event ranked 11th by HLTV. I think that's pretty fair, actually. They were a new lineup that had yet to prove themselves. The old lineup was a solid upset team with dark horse potential, but they never really could fulfill on the potential late in tournaments. Like, they were the classic team to beat you in the group stage, the top 5 team, or in the quarterfinals, but then just fade and lose a semi too easily, or almost win a map and then just get blown out on another map. They were just known to fade because they were inexperienced players. Even their in-game leader, Dexter, one of the most experienced players, actually himself hadn't had experience of going that far on land. Basically, Frozen, who's still a young guy and who himself had been the baby of the old Carrigan teams, he was actually supposed to be sort of the vet of the lineup, as it were. And the newer player, JDC, who's not even in the lineup anymore, who helped make this team from the NXT, he was even considered one of the more like leadership figures. So you could see they had certain elements, certain intangibles that understandably weren't playing to their favour. But the difference is that team was night and day to this team. Like, that team, they would cause the upset, but then just fall apart against an opponent that maybe even would have lost to the team they've just upset. It would just be too easy. Like at the major IEM Rio last year, they can beat Cloud9 and look great doing it at the end, but then just lose to outsiders. And it's just like, yeah, whatever. They can beat Heroic at Dallas, like one of the last runs of this core that they had in the old lineup. They can beat Heroic, in theory, like number 1, number 2 team in the world, but then they can lose to Ents in the final. Like, this just, you can see, they were a team, I can see why people hyped them off the potential, but then people went too far off the potential when they couldn't actually deliver it. They would show hints of it, or they'd show it when it mattered sort of the least, and then when it mattered the most, you could rely on this team to collapse. And people like torzsi to underperform, people like Xerxes to have way too much pressure on them, and Dexter not to frag out and not to call an amazing game, quite frankly. Now, the new lineup, remember, they've already had this lineup, people might not know this with Jim Fat. They've had this team in Siuhy since Cologne already. They already had that event, and they were a team that flunked the event. They were one of the Astralis victims of that Astralis run, where not a lot of people expected much from Astralis, but they made this really deep run. Now, to be fair, they did beat Na'Vi, the team they just beat here in this tournament. We've obviously now shown themselves to be a team that's in some form. They also did have to play Vitality, the other team they lost to, who, to be fair, is the number 1 team in the world, and obviously won game as 8 shortly after that, so it's not like that's any doubt. Losing to Astralis is a bit sus. Obviously, later on, the Astralis run looks more legit. Beating Na'Vi is good, but not insane at that tournament, and losing to Vitality is actually fine. So they did flunk Cologne, but it's not the end of the world. At the same time, if you play teams like Astralis, and you are actually a top 5 team in the world, yeah, they should be on your radar to beat. You should probably be favoured over them. This EPL run, though, let me make absolutely no uncertain terms when I explain this, is very legit in the most meaningful sense of who you faced and where they're ranked. There is an asterisk, like it is the last CSGO tournament, so as a result, some people are already spamming the CS2 beta individually, as a team. Some people are hardcore playing, get ready, playing qualifiers, etc. Not qualifiers in CS2, obviously, but just getting ready for the next game, knowing it's the end of the tournament, which I also do imagine, to be fair, means when teams got eliminated, they might not have been in the scrim pool, and that might have affected the quality somewhat, but even so, all the teams left in the tournament, all these top-ranked teams, are still trying to win the tournament, still trying to win the prize money, trying to win the last CSGO, and they're trying to beat you, MOUZ, so these are legit runs, in my opinion. Like, you look at who they played, bizarrely, the only team that beat them was actually in the opener. They actually got shockingly upset by MIBR in a 3-mapper. But to be fair, the third map, Mirage, which is a back and forth map, and also a mega upset map, was also a 16-14 to MIBR. And quite frankly, I actually think MIBR is a slightly underrated team. They're not a good team. They're nowhere close to a top team. If you look at the players, you won't recognise most of them. But they have so much upset potential in sort of silly group stage games like this. Just whenever you watch them play, they'll always have like a map or two where they really do actually take a bigger name team way closer than you think. So after that loss, you go lower bracket. They beat EG. Actually, a surprisingly close game. A fair play to EG. They actually did play decently in this one. Then in the lower bracket, like normally if you see this on the Liquipedia, you're supposed to think we're going out like, what, second to last place or something, because they had to play heroic after that. Number 4 team in the world. 2-0'd them, swept them convincingly. People like Frozen and Torzsi just popping off. Stown, Jabby, the players you want to see play well for Heroic, not really, playing quite badly. Katie even playing like shit, unsurprisingly he's gone from the team now and or wanted to have major changes. Then they got the rematch against MIPR, beat them 2-0, revenge. There was one close map, but this time they won it, and then they won the other one with ease. Got rid of them. Then they played Furia, the big brother of MIPR, as it were. Mega stomp, by the way. This was an easily 2-0 clap. Another absolute trash game from Furia. To be fair, we've heard that there's something going on with Kesarao. He was bad in this one. Jim Fat, the new guy, had like one of the best series of his entire career already out the gate in this one. He was absolutely stomping it. Then they play Face Clan. Again, on paper, you're supposed to go out to the vets here. Convincingly 2-0'd them. And in this one, loads of players were going off. You had Frozen, Jim Fat, Exertion. Everyone was going off. Meanwhile, FaZe looked very lackluster. They did not get their stars in the server. Then you play G2. Now, you're definitely supposed to go out now. Like, G2 has so much firepower and is one of the best teams in the world. They're number 3 team in the world. This was a 3-map series, and to be fair, the first 2 were close. Like, G2 could have won 2-0, but they didn't. And one of the reasons they didn't, and this is also why, though, I will say it, there's another world where actually I think MOUZ just straight up loses this and G2 would have won and maybe even won the tournament, is the first map, which was a really close 16-13 loss for G2, they did have m0NESY go like 0-11 on T-side and get like 3 ADR or something impossible like that. Like, as though that's ever going to happen again or is normal. Meanwhile, like, torzsi for the series was like plus 20. Like, will torzsi usually outperform m0NESY? Probably not. Frozen's really good, but you already expected that anyway. Is Frozen better than Nico? Not really, but he did look like that in the series. So, yeah, maybe you got a little bit of grace in this one, but even so, you can catch G2 on a bad day, you can catch them on a bad map. The third map, you just wrecked them completely. Speaking of which, you go then to the semis, same story. So now you're playing the number 2 team in the world. You're leveling up to an even harder team, a team that makes all the finals, by the way. Now you're playing them in semi. Surely you're going to lose, right? It'd be fine too. Another 3-map series, another one where Ents can go, oh, but we almost won on the first 2. We could have won 2-0, but you didn't. And when it went to the third map, we saw the same trend play out, which is convincing win from MOUZ. They actually crushed this decider. And I thought this was big. This along with the G2 one. These are big wins for the team, for the newer players, for the new core now, for Siuhy as an in-game leader, the confidence of people like torzsi and Frozen. You can go against this level of player, the best teams in the world, the ones with the stars. If people don't know, like, Nertz was right on course to like stomp this tournament, win the MVP if he made the final. He was looking fantastic, as he has in many tournaments that Ents has had so far. Sunpius and Nertz were like, they were all right. They were good on certain maps. Overall, they weren't as explosive. They didn't perform quite the same way. I would say it's on and off how MOUZ's opponents performed against them. But yeah, what a massive win. And then you make it to the final. Now, admittedly, in the final, on paper, this is actually an easier result, right? FaZe was number 6 in the world. G2 was number 3 in the world. Ents is number 2 in the world. Vitality's gone already. So who are we playing, right? Na'Vi, believe it or not. Number 7 in the world. Now, number 7's maybe flattering because, yeah, there aren't really that many good teams right now because a lot of teams are dodgy. Even teams like the Cloud9 Super Team's dodgy. Furia team hasn't worked. There's a bunch of teams that are still at phases in bad shape. There are a lot of teams that are all over the place. But even so, you look at the results, you look at who they beat and who they lost to, and the fact that in this tournament they were on fire. Like, Simple was going for the MVP. This bit was looking really good again. Like, a renaissance, a flashback. Admittedly, they didn't have to beat Vitality. They did beat Monty. And because of the way the tournament went, they also earlier had to beat Eternal Fire. So sure, this isn't the craziest Na'Vi we've ever seen. But even so, it's a best-of-5 final on LAN against Simple, who's really good, and experienced people like Alexi B. Like, actually, this isn't a foregone conclusion. I could have seen a world where Ents like felt the pressure, where people like Simple went off, where the map pool became now a consideration of like, do we have a deep enough map pool to go 2-3 maps? What happens if Na'Vi steals a Mirage or Inferno? Suddenly, where do we go? What's it going to be like if we get to that Ancient or something along those lines? How are we going to do? Well, what happened was it was a 3-0 sweep in the final. There was one close map, and that's because it's the third map, which was the one to decide the series, and it was even then an overtime one, and even then MOUZ won. So it kind of shows you like MOUZ just owned this tournament. torzsi had a fantastic finals. Jim Fat had a fantastic finals. Frozen had a pretty solid all-around finals. Simple was slightly underwhelming. He still had the most kills on Na'Vi, which says a lot about Na'Vi's problems in the finals. Everyone on MOUZ, minus Frozen and Siuhy, had more frags than Simple in the finals. So that should just tell you the level MOUZ played on, but then also how underwhelming actually Na'Vi was. And in fact, it was Bit who'd been having this throwback event who actually shit the bed in the final. It was very underwhelming all in all, and meant that Na'Vi was never really in the match when you look at it. So you look at this run, this is just fantastic stuff. Now then, obviously, during this tournament, facing so many big opponents, MOUZ was underdog. MOUZ was a team that people thought they should lose here. This isn't supposed to be when they continue. I will say, obviously, this wasn't a huge stadium event, but even so, it had a much better crowd setup than the last Pro Leagues. It wasn't just like everyone's girlfriend plus 2 admins plus a guy who lives in Malta. It wasn't that. There was actually like an all-right crowd, but it wasn't like a Cologne or a massive stadium event. But you look at who they beat. They beat the number 2 team in the world, number 3 team in the world, number 4 team in the world, number 6 team in the world, number 7 team in the world, and the number 1 team in the world, Vitality, just went out in the quarters to the Monty team. So you can't really get much more legit in terms of scalps to get, right, and opponents to beat. And there were also not only convincing series, but some very convincing individual maps, and crucially, individual performances. I actually think, I know some people thought torzsi was the MVP, numbers-wise, it's justified. Obviously, because he's the new guy, a lot of people want to say Jimfat or Yimfat is. For me, Frozen is the MVP because he is the rifler. Yes, he has some resources, but you notice how he used them. He uses his brain. He has a nice skill set. He has an all-around game. And he's one of the only constants that continues on. Because even though torzsi in this tournament was really good, I don't necessarily buy that he can do that tournament to tournament to tournament, whereas I know Frozen can do this. That's the difference. And Yimfat, look, in this tournament, he was the X factor, but I definitely don't buy that he's going to play at this many tournaments. I actually think torzsi can, and I think his big upgrade and the fact that he had an MVP-worthy performance is enormous here, but that's why we need to talk about the fact that they changed players. That's the most important thing about MOUZ. This is not the old MOUZ. Not at all. In the old MOUZ, torzsi, I thought, was mega overrated. He would just dominate a group stage game or a lesser game or a non-stage game, then he'd go to the big mat and then he'd just do nothing. And I could predict every time the other AWP was going to show out. Even people like OC would show out against this guy. That's why actually it was so shocking that Cloud9 blew that quarters at Rio, and that even people like Shiro started to have their issues. I mean, he's still really good, but started to have moments where it looked uncertain against this team, the old lineup. So to me, the key thing you've had here is fair play to torzsi, because it's only because he did an interview that this narrative came out. He did an interview when he knew that they were getting Siuhy back after the major, where he almost low-key flamed Dexter along the lines of comparing him to Siuhy when they'd been in MOUZ NXT together, with the logic that Siuhy would sort of micro him and tell him when to attack, when to be defensive, when to go out now, when to take a peek, when to come in the group, when to go on his own. So essentially, as far as I'm going to tell, torzsi himself wasn't deciding that. He wasn't like some cerebral device, mobile up. He was just waiting for his IGL to tell him what to do. And Dexter, because he's a fragger and I'm assuming more of a loose caller, was just thinking, we all the AWPer, do what you want. You take care of yourself, mate. And that wasn't working out for torzsi as far as we can tell. Now, you look with Siuhy. By the way, Siuhy was just reviving bloody Acor's career over in Gamer League. Remember, making that Immer look fucking awesome when he was in position. Now, he comes in after that interview, and it's looking awesome. It looks like actually torzsi was right, and Siuhy's killing it. That's a really interesting angle to go forwards, because maybe this Siuhy guy is some sort of whisperer of certain types of star talents when we look at the lineup he's got now. I do think in the old lineup, they asked way too much of Frozen. That was like when Rops was in the team a couple of years back before he left for FaZe. You just asking him, he has to be 1.5 times better than the other star, or you're not going to win the game. And the problem is, despite what Maui thinks, Frozen is not Rops. He's getting close, he's very good. He's still a couple of years from the peak that I've seen Rops hit, though, especially in terms of being a bona fide superstar player. But now he's getting the experience of being in the deep matches. You're starting to see some of it. And now he has help. Now he can actually get to a position where he can be the MVP of a tournament and be a top 10 player in the world. I think when you looked at the old lineup, you had Frozen was guaranteed to do well or be all right. torzsi would probably collapse. Xertion was sort of like Exertion, as he demands it to be called. He was sort of the X factor, but because he's an entry, that's not always going to be ideal, is it? And quite frankly, Dexter's calling, I thought meant Exertion sometimes had a hard life and he's just running through a brick wall. Meanwhile, now you look, because now Xertion doesn't have to do that. They've got more talent all around. There's a real chance for Frozen now. If this team can be this sort of level of performance, top 4 making semis, he can be a top 10 player in the world. And with consistency, not just for a month, for a year. And he can be in that mix, and he can actually be mixing up with the other really good riflers in the world who are out there, the Nikos, K Seratos, Axiles, Ropses of the world. Then you look at the rest of his career, by the way, if you're Frozen. He won EPL with MOUZ spots with Carrigan back in 2019, beating the Stralis team. Now he's won here, beating some very, very good teams with a totally different lineup in 2023, 4 years later. And in the meantime, he had a top 4 finish at IM Rio, a major. So all of a sudden, this guy's resume is starting to get cooking. Now if he can start to add in the individual accolades like MVPs and top 10 placings and top 20 list type scenarios and some more trophies, hey, now he's starting to actually get into that sort of a position. As I said, when Rops left MOUZ, for me, the obvious thing for Frozen is, now's your time, mate. The space is there. Are you going to become the next Rops, as it were? Much as in the old MSL Dignitas/North, you would have it where AZ was the entry star, and then he went out, so then Kirby took that role, then he became a star, then he got recruited somewhere else, then out he went to, and then in came Config, and then he was really good at that. And you get the premise of how it went. That was how they used to make it work in terms of the resources and who could be the star in those teams. Now is Frozen's time to be that star player in past MOUZ teams that someone like Nico and Frozen, Rops rather, have been. Dexter, I always thought in the old lineup was just a meh in-game leader. It seemed all right. And as a fragger, wasn't bad. Obviously, he individually used to be a fragger. He was just all right, though, when you're talking about Tier 1 European Counter-Strike. Then you look at this new lineup, though. The other player, obviously, was JDC, and a lot of that was like he knew the players. He was supposedly one of the people with Cyclone who helped set the lineup. Seemed like more of a supportive element. His problem was a lack of firepower, and then when torzsi's not that good, and Exertion's having a hard time, and the game isn't some amazing calling game from Dexter, what do you really have? You have Frozen and the odd upset. That's about it. And the fact you've got this team that all know each other and you play together. You got that, but you don't really have the pieces to be a true top 5 team in the world. That's why whenever they were ranked there, I was like, just wait, just give it another tournament, or just wait till this major coming up, or just wait till this Cologne, and you just knew they were going to fall off. So to me, another massive factor is the Siuhy aspect. I thought Dexter's calling was just whatever. Siuhy seems pretty good. Like this year, he seems to not even have a feel for his own personnel. Now with 2 different lineups I've seen him in. But also, you look at like the breadth of maps he's calling over. You look at how his stars are performing. Individually, he actually can frag better than this. He can be sort of like a snappy. He can be a good fragger. He doesn't have to, and he hasn't had to at this tournament. The thing is, right now, realistically, this does look like a legit top 5 team. Like if CSGO was the game going forwards and we're not in a new game, why couldn't this team be top 5 when you look at the results they had? Now, I'm not going to be crazy and say they can be first. I don't think they actually can be, or that they'll be top 3. I think that's probably too far, because here's the issue, right? If you look at this one tournament they've just played at now, here's their performances in this one tournament, right? Let's start at the top. torzsi, 1.22 rating, 1.43 KD. He's definitely not going to have that KD, by the way. There's a massive sample size, 19 maps. But he's not going to be there. But I tell you what, he can have tournaments where he could be a 1.2 rating. And I could see him being more about like 1.15 to 1.2. That's solid. That's good enough. That's beyond above average at tier 1 AWP. That can be star material on the lower end of the star AWPers. You're not some Shiro character. But that's reliable in my opinion. I actually think that can replicate. I think this Siuhy narrative makes sense. Frozen, I also think, again, you can do those numbers again. So we've got the stars. We've got the star AWPer and Rifler here. The problem becomes the others after this. Like Jim Fat, there's no universe, I believe, where he can post 1.20 ratings on the regular. Like, that is ridiculous. That's like Rain when he would have those pop-offs at the big events last year. Like, that cannot be relied on. And quite frankly, if he can do it as often as Rain did, like, you know, at 1 out of every 3 or 4 events, it'll be a big deal for MOUZ. I would guess he'll be more like just supportive element, and he'll have the occasional round where he looks at it as quite a consistent game. I don't think he's going to be an explosive player in the regard people were bragging and raving about here, though. Then the exertion one, again, also, you're just not going to have 1.19 tournaments from this game. If you do, by the way, you're going to win a lot of trophies. So realistically, that's going to be more like a 1.05 or 1.08 or something, more in line with his role as well, and who else is in the team and the resources. And then Siuhy, actually, that's about the sort of level, or like an 0.98 or 1.0. Yeah, that's sort of replicable. So the problem is, some of this firepower is going to go away. Some of this probably isn't as plausible, is it, overall? So I think, yeah, all in all, it's very interesting. The problem is, Jim Fat's going to come back down to earth. It's still good you have Frozen and torzsi, especially because there's no overlap. I think that's big. And I do think, I want to see more from torzsi, but I do think the potential, now he's got the right setup, does seem to be there. He was hitting pretty consistently. He looked fucking good in those games. I do think there is massive potential from Siuhy. He has actually shown so far, maybe he can be one of the next great in-game leaders in the lineage of where I've put people like Alexi B, etc., in terms of the newer people coming on. I would also say, you just look at his resume already. Like, look how people like torzsi and Imma have played under him and then under other in-game leaders. Look at his resume in terms of results. He was second place at the major with an underdog team, and now he's won ESL ProLeague with an underdog team. Like, this is phenomenal stuff. Neither of his lineups, by the way, ranked in the top 10 when he's made the final of these fairly large relative to the time period tournaments that are going on. It's also just crazy because MOUZ has basically proven that their academy system was phenomenal, because MOUZ NXT had all these players except Frozen, if people don't know. They had Jim Fat obviously more recently on the team, and then the rest of them previously were on the MOUZ NXT team, which used to be the best team when the We Play Academy existed, before we all had to go online. If you go back to those certain years where they were able to have like one of the only LAN tournaments in the world, weren't they? If you look at the map pool also looked really strong. Basically, they were monsters on Inferno Mirage, which everyone plays. They were surprisingly good on Nuke. Their overpass was legit. And then Ancient Vertigo, they were all right on depending on the opponent. They didn't play Anubis. Like, this map pool, if you can do really well, by the way, in Inferno Mirage and Nuke, you can win a lot of best of 3 series against even the best teams in the world. Like, 2 of these 3 maps are always going to be there, if not all 3, quite frankly. And I actually also will say for Siuhy as well, these are 3 maps as well, where if you're calling a good T-side consistently, you're just a really good IGL. If you can call a good T-side on Inferno, Nuke, and depending on your personnel and opponent, Mirage, I actually think at that point in time, you've shown your skills. Like, obviously you have like some of the utility understanding on Inferno. On Nuke, you've got to really understand rotations. On Mirage, you've got to have a really good sense for the mid-round call, for when to abandon what you're doing and call a quick pace change, etc. I think you get the whole gamut of skill set there. And then what? He was also good on overpass on the side. Like, this guy looks like he's really legit. For many years of my career in esports, it really was just me. I did it all. I was the one person driving myself forwards. I didn't have people around me to help me. But actually, one thing I've learned over the years is the value of a support network. And mine is, of course, the Illuminati, my Patreon community. So this video, like many on my channel, was made possible by Ahmed Hadjou, Frisky, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Toorhin, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Do you want to ask a question for my regular AMA? Do you want to find out teasers? Who are the guests for the upcoming interviews? I often do. Maybe you want to be part of those long discussions where we can talk about whatever you want in esports. Well, if any of those tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Illuminati today. Support my content via the Patreon link in the description box below.